Yeah. So the idea that the reason I said it was easy to make is because basically we went to California for a week.
Yeah.
And we pretty much recorded live in the studio. All the 6 of us just literally in a room together, not as small as this, but not much bigger than this, and just literally just looking at it and just played the music. And that for me is a very unusual way to make a record, because I'm used to the situation where you get the drummer in for a week, you send the drummer away, you get the bass player for a week, and you work in a more kind of modular, fragmented way, but you have more control. But you lose some of that chemistry and electricity.
And also you used to just write the music and then just find the people. Now you have a specific band to also write the music for, Marco, the drummer, and
so I knew the musical personalities I was writing for, and I knew what they were capable of doing. So in that, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you it was an easy. I mean, the writing was still hard. Writing is always hard for me.
But where do you start when you just sit down?
Well, good question. I don't know. I wish I did. You know, the thing about writing or creating anything from nothing is it's a very scary thing to sit down and be confronted with a blank page.
Yeah.
Metaphorically, a blank page. How do you pluck something from the air? How do you create something that wasn't there? Usually the answer is, honestly, you start off by stealing. It's true. And I think it's true of almost everything that's ever been created. Every creative act has started off with somebody saying, I really like this, I like this Picasso, I like this Beatles track, I like this Stanley Kubrick film, I like this, whatever it is. And we call that, we refer to those as influences.
Yeah.
So usually you start off by stealing from somewhere or taking inspiration from something that already exists. And I'm no different. I'm inspired and I'm influenced by other music, by movies, by novels, by whatever it is. And that usually becomes a starting point. But you hope that when you develop it through your own personality, it ends up being something unique.
Yeah. So Grace for Drowning was quite different from Insurgents, especially the fact that the lyrics seem more personal, because in Insurgents the lyric
very abstract.
Yeah, very abstract and quite meaningless. Not to offend you, but
no, they were meaningless. You're right. No, they were. I used on the words on Insurgentes. I kind of improvised and I just used the sound of words almost as like a texture.
Yeah.
I didn't try to make them mean that much. I worked with almost just the sound of the words.
Okay.
Grace for Drowning was more, as you say, more personal.
Yeah.
The songs had more meaning, and it also reflected the fact that I moved out of the city to the country for the first time.
Yeah, I read that. You also got a dog,
and I got a dog, and I was looking out my window and I was seeing trees and rivers and horses and sheep, and so for me it had a more kind of golden quality somehow, less industrial.
Yeah.
Insurgentes had more of an industrial feeling to it, more organic, and I think Raven continues, with that more slightly organic
personal feeling. Also.
Definitely, I mean, definitely personal.
So why did you decide to make an illustrated book to go along with the music, this one?
Well, the thing is, I've done a few of these over the years now, and I love doing them, but this project particularly seemed perfect because the idea, straight away, the idea that you're going to do something which is like a series of short stories through music.
Yeah.
So the obvious thing is, okay, we're going to do an album which is basically based on the idea of short stories. The obvious thing to do then is to do a special edition which actually feels and looks like a book.
Yeah.
And not just a book, but a book that you might have found 100 years ago. Like or today if you went to like a second-hand bookstore.
Yeah, antique stores. Yeah.
You found excuse me, you find like a book of like Victorian short stories. How would that book be illustrated? And I thought, okay, so we're not going to have any photography this time, we want illustration.
Yeah.
And I went to Hayo, the German author, and I kind of said to him, I said, imagine you've gone to an antique bookstore and you found this book covered in dust, cobwebs, 100 years old of supernatural stories. How would that be illustrated, and that's exactly what he did.
Okay. Well, this new record, once again, it leaked before it was released, which is a sad thing. But what do you think about this, especially the fact that this proggy world is still a niche genre? What do you think about this? People leaking albums.
Well, it's not the fans doing it. It's journalists that do it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. What happens is that the about 6 or 8 weeks, or sometimes 10 weeks before the release of the album, the record companies send out the promotional copies for reviews, for journalist reviews. Thousands go out. I don't know how many. Probably 3,000 or 4,000 across the world. Probably 3,000 or 4,000 go out. Radio stations, magazines, internet, all anyone that might potentially review. So it only takes one of those people, only takes one person to not give a shit and say, I don't know who this guy is, but my friend likes it, so I'll upload it. And then suddenly that link becomes available to everyone on the internet, and you can't stop it. And what do I think about it? Of course, it annoys me because not just because of the sales or the commercial implications, but because for me the whole magic of an album being released is gone. Yeah,
it's like a new album already. Before it's released, it's old.
Exactly.
It's just to me, it's just a thrill to stand with the record in your hands and just
exactly this. And I remember, when I was a kid, waiting eagerly for the day of release of a new album by whichever band I was listening to, and the thrill of going to the record store in the morning of the day of release. That's gone, because now, as you say, by the time the album is actually released, everyone's been listening to it for weeks. And I think that's really a shame. It takes a lot of the romantic side out of music to me. There are, of course, also the commercial, sales implications. It's hard to sell records now, so it's hard for people like me to make a living from making records. The truth is, I don't really. I'll be happy if this album would break even. If I make my money back. It's very expensive.
So you don't live off your music?
I do, but I don't live off my solo career. My solo I have other things which I do. And also remixing for other artists. Unfortunately, that all gives me a good income. But my solo work is what we call a labour of love, because I don't expect to make any money from this at all. I don't know what people think, making a record like this costs now, but I flew 6 musicians to California. I put them all in a fancy hotel for 2 weeks. I hired Alan Parsons, who's like one of the most expensive guys you could hire, and I did it in a very expensive studio. And I hired an orchestra, and so all of those things cost money. Of course they do. So will I ever make my money back? No. Okay. But it doesn't matter, because for me the art is more important.
So Alan Parsons, a legend. How did this happen? Did you just write an email to him? Hey.
No, we called him up. I mean, the thing is that I decided from probably about halfway through the writing process, I decided that I wanted a sound on this record, which was more vintage. I wanted a sound that I associated with the classic art rock albums of the early 70s. There aren't a lot of guys around now that can do that. It's kind of becoming a lost art, because for me, I mean, including myself, a lot of people now grow up making music on computers and learning to produce records using, computer technology and digital technology. And so this art of making records in the old way with analog equipment is becoming a bit of a lost art. So I wanted an engineer that knew how to do that. And Alan was top of my list, because Alan's the guy that worked with the Beatles, he worked with Pink Floyd, he made his own fabulous albums, and he's absolutely of that generation. So he was top of my list, and we called him up, and luckily he already knew who I was, and so played him some of the songs, he really liked them, so it was easy, There's nothing more to say, really. He says it was a great experience, and he did a fabulous job.
You said that this solo album is labor of love, but is it? I believe it's your main project. it's not. It started out as a side project, right? But how do you view it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a complicated question. Did it start as a side project? The thing is, here's the thing. I've always done solo things. The first 3 Porcupine Tree albums are solo records. I have a project called Bass Communion, which is solo. I have another project called IEM, which is solo. This is the first time. It's my phone.
Oh,
this,
okay.
this is the first time, or within Sahentes, it was the first time I did a solo project, but actually used my real name.
Yeah.
And that is significant, because what that means is that I felt for the first time that it was a record which I felt encapsulated all of my musical personality rather than just one aspect. And so when I started the solo project, I knew that it was going to be much more than a side project. I knew that this could potentially, and was probably most likely going to become the most important thing for the rest of my musical career. And so it develops, and so Grace for Drowning, and Now the Raven That Refused to Sing. And I think it must be obvious to anyone that this music is the most important thing to me now.
Yeah.
And that this band is, I mean, I've put a lot of work into putting the band together and the show and everything. It should be obvious to anyone now that this is much more than a side project. And as you say, potentially this is going to be now the main strand of my musical endeavours. Yeah. I think so.
Okay, so tonight's show is going to be a seated show. This is my first progressive seated show.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, but what can we expect from this show? Why a seated show?
Okay, well, I asked the same question because it wasn't my idea, it was my agent's idea.
Oh, okay.
He came to see the show on the last tour and he said, you know what, I think this is the kind of show that people would prefer to see seated. And one of the reasons why I think he felt that is that there is a very strong visual, sort of almost theatrical visual side to it. There's screens, there's films, there's also a quadraphonic sound system. So I suppose it's the kind of show where you want to just sit back and absorb it. Yeah. And it's been an experiment. I felt some nights it really worked well with a seated audience, and other nights I felt a little bit strange. I guess there's no ideal. A lot of my music is very mellow and very quiet, and a lot of my music rocks. So it's like it's kind of constantly going between the two things. So sometimes it seems odd, and sometimes it seems perfect. I don't know. I'm still not sure about it, but we've done this tour with a seated vibe, and it seems to work pretty well. You see what you think. So.
Okay, I can't wait.
it is more of a theatrical, it's more of an audio-visual experience,
Like the book also.
Like
I think it's the way to experience this album. I was just blown away. I didn't know that pictures could do so much.
Right. Well, if you imagine the live show as an extension of the book and the visuals, then it is the kind of thing I guess you just want to sit there and just kind of take it all in. So we'll see. So
you said that this is your main project. Well, this basically is your main project right now. So I would like to ask you about Porcupine Tree. It's been 3 years since the incident was released. I saw you in 2010.
Yeah.
Actually, in Aarhus, where you were playing.
Okay.
And I've read something about you saying that the incident didn't strike you as having anything new, so you felt like it was time for change.
Right.
So is Porcupine Tree dead or?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, I mean, I thought the incident was a really good record. I was really proud of it. But for the first time, I thought maybe that we had begun to repeat ourselves and myself in terms of the writing. No, it's not. I haven't said anything melodramatic like Porcupine Tree is broken up or anything like that. I don't see the point in doing that. Yeah. The point is that Porcupine Tree will come back when we feel that there is something to say with that band. So will you try to reinvent Porcupine Tree, because it went
more metal,
Yeah.
some kind? Are
Yeah.
you going to put some jazz elements
I
like
don't
from
know.
this, or
I don't know
what
because
is-
no, I don't think the jazz because at least one of the guys in the band is not really interested in jazz music, so I think jazz is not something we would. But I think the answer to your question is there would be no point in coming back unless we were going to
Yeah.
do that. And metal for me personally is something I don't want to use anymore
okay?
as part of the musical vocabulary. The thing is, you have to acknowledge now. I have to acknowledge that in the 12 years since I started using metal as part of the kind of musical vocabulary of the band, and I worked with Opeth, who were a very important progressive metal band at the same time. In that 10-year period, the scene has become completely flooded with progressive metal bands. Usually, I have to say, when somebody says to me they play, a young kid comes up to me with a demo or whatever, and he says to me, we play progressive music, I would say 90% of the time it turns out to be progressive metal music. I'm not sure at what point in the last 10 years progressive became progressive metal, but it seems to me that so much music from this area now has got this metal influence.
Yeah.
It's boring.
Yeah.
It's become
It's
very,
just,
very boring.
I think sometimes it's just see what I can do. I can, a technical show off sometimes.
It's a very easy way to make music which sounds complex, but it's also very clinical because metal music tends to be based around riffs.
Yeah.
A series of riffs. I've got 3 or 4 riffs. I string them together. I've got a progressive metal band. And I think what you see with my new band, for example, is trying to get away as far away as possible from that, and to bring back some spiritual elements to the music by drawing on jazz, and by employing these fantastic musicians who are not interested in just playing riffs.
Yeah.
You know, that's boring.
It's more like the real progressive, from the 70s, 60s and 70s.
Right.
That vibe.
Right.
Like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all that stuff. Yes, and
great instrumentalists expressing themselves in a kind of spiritual way, and I think listen, I don't want to sound like I'm down on progressive metal. I think for a while the fusion of metal and progressive music was really, really fresh and invigorating to the whole scene.
Yeah.
But now it's reached a point where it needs to go away. For me, and like the last Opeth record, for example, completely did away with almost entirely metal.
Yeah.
I think that's significant when you see a band like Opeth, who were like seen as the primary progressive metal band, kind of ignoring metal. I think you have to say, okay, these guys are visionaries in a way, and so I think the same is true with Porcupine Tree. If we came back, I don't think we'd be interested in exploring metal anymore. But at the same time, I don't necessarily know what we would explore, so I'm waiting for that to occur.
So the next Porcupine Tree album might divide the fans like Opeth. Some are really just.
I think so. Yeah. I think at this stage in my career, whatever I do tends to divide people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Divide fans because there is in my career there is quite a lot of different directions and styles. Some people like this bit more, some people like that bit more. Some people would like me to make a really extreme metal album. Some people can't stand the metal thing.
Yeah.
Some people would like me to get rid of the jazz from the sound because they don't like jazz. Some people love the jazz. And I think at this stage, anything I do will have its supporters and its detractors. That's just life.
So last year was the first year of Prague Awards, and you were nominated and won the title as Guiding Light. How was it to, and congratulations, how was it to be recognized?
Well, of course,
Guiding Light is a
great.
huge title.
I guess it is, yeah. Of course it's wonderful. The thing about awards and, it's chart positions, awards, polls, all this stuff. The thing is, they're a lot of fun. They're great, I mean, you'd have to be really miserable not to smile when somebody tells you that you're getting an award. But at the same time, I also understand that the whole notion is pretty absurd. How can you award something? Music is not competitive.
Yeah.
Music is not a sport. So this whole notion of the best, the top, it's absurd, but of course it's a lot of fun, and it's great to feel like that I have some respect for what I do, the work that I do. So that was, I'm not even quite sure what guiding light means, but I guess it means someone that's kind of inspiration to other musicians, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
And obviously I was very, very pleased to receive that award. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference to me in the way I think about music or what I do. It's just fun. It's something for my mum. It makes my mum happy.
Oh, okay. That's nice. So, I also had a question about what you think about the state of progressive music today, but you've pretty much answered that all this progressive metal. But what about progressive rock and all the...
No, I was only talking about progressive metal. I think there is a lot of other music in the world now which... You see, the thing is, the word progressive in itself is kind of limiting. I think the spirit of ambition that characterises a lot of progressive, what we kind of refer to as progressive music, is alive and well and thriving, and in many, I would say, anything from a band like Sigur Rós to a band like Radiohead to bands like Muse, Flaming Lips, all of these bands for me have something of the tradition of ambitious, progressive, what we call progressive music. I'm always very suspicious when a band comes to me and say, we play progressive rock.
Yeah.
Because the bands that originally made that kind of music, they never called themselves progressive rock bands. If you say to rock...
You also said, I can't remember what interview it was that, it was from the Arriving Somewhere DVD where you said that your music isn't prog.
Well, I wouldn't call, I would never say, if somebody said to me, what kind of music do you play? I would never say I play progressive rock. I would say I play music which tries to take the listener on a musical journey. It's about albums, it's not about individual songs. It has a cinematic quality, it's experimental. The idea that you would call your music progressive rock for me is a little bit limiting. And I think most of the really interesting bands that kind of have that element don't refer to them. The bands I mentioned, the Sigur Rós and the Radios, the bands that say they play progressive rock for me instantly make me a little bit suspicious. Is it, it's going to be something very generic and very predictable, something I've heard a million times before. People might say that about my music too, which they're quite entitled to. But I personally don't. I wouldn't refer to my music as anything. It's not like I'm trying to deny being progressive rock, but I don't see the purpose of labelling it anything.
Okay. So the future. You always seem to be ahead with your projects.
Right.
So I would like to know if you have some new projects in your mind. And
I don't. No, I don't. For once, I don't. You're right. You're right to say that. I usually do. I usually do. But right now, well, the Ravens only just come out. And we only just started touring, so it's still quite fresh. But I don't actually have any idea what my next thing will be right now.
Okay.
I know what I would like it to be. I would love to. I mean, my big unfulfilled ambition is to score a movie, to do a soundtrack to a movie.
Yeah.
So if you ask me what would you like to do next, I would love to do a movie.
Okay.
But I don't know if that'll happen.
Yeah, because that was also my question for you. Okay. If you had to do some kind of artistic projects that aren't musical.
Okay.
Maybe you could say a movie soundtrack for movie is musical, but if it couldn't be anything musical, what could you see yourself doing if it had to be creative? If
it wasn't music,
writing books, you have.
I like cinema. I mean, my other big sort of passion is cinema. And I love movies, and I've tried a couple of times over the years to make movies. To write scripts and things. So if I wasn't doing music, I think I'd be trying to be a filmmaker.
Okay.
But I don't have the time to do both.